Seriously? Thank you for the help with this, Desi. It looks just like the original, but it doesn't even itch. Tom brushed an imaginary speck of dust from the mess dress he'd thrown on in the back room and grinned. Desi was smiling proudly, while Melondi held hands with a bewildered Vadim. As usual, Lark was playing with her on the pad. Vadim, this is the US Air Force officer's mess dress. The most stylish and most uncomfortable suit in existence. I wanted to surprise Professor Pelavon since she's dressing up, and Desi and Melondi were able to help. It's a very pretty blue, sir, Vadim offered tentatively, looking curiously at the rack of medals on his left breast. Thank you. She's wearing something from Earth, so I decided I would too, he said, as he pulled open the gallery door and they stepped into the hall. It may cause a stir with some of the military parents, but I see veterans showing off their uniforms all the time. Today is my turn. He was turning to lock up when a sharp crack echoed in the hall, and he froze for a moment. Down the corridor, a figure in Shilvanti navy dress stood with her back to him. Another shot rang out, and a bright spray of azure blood hit the wall as the woman by the door slumped to the ground. Gun! Get inside! Desi had the presence of mind to pull Lark back, and he was pushing Vadim and Melondi in as the figure turned and raised her hand. Wood splintered inches from Melondi's head as she ducked inside, and he'd been standing right there, the last one inside. The range couldn't be more than 40 feet, and while he'd never been a marksman, the open corridor was practically a shooting gallery. Anyone with the least skill aiming at him shouldn't have just missed. Fuck. She wants Melondi. Get back to the Voyager exhibit and hide. Tom reached over, hitting the door lock, before looking over to the girls, who were looking at him in confusion. Go on! What's going on? Desi asked, as Tom glanced over the lock before making for the lights. The confused babble of protests was already starting from Kellark and Melondi, while Vadim hung on her arm. Lark looked shocked and was still glued to her omnipad. Fuck, there isn't time for this, he shouted. Get Vadim in back, I'll be right behind you. Urali Tajer cursed under her breath as she stumbled toward the door. Her breath was coming in fits as she fought the panic down again. She only had 7 shots left. She hadn't even hit the target, whichever of the two it was. And now they were there in the dark, with a human. In the dark, with a human. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she beat it down, gulping deep lungfuls of air as she reached the gallery door. Breathe. You will not faint. Not now. There isn't time for this. Get Vadim in back. I'll be right behind you. It was Warwick's voice, muffled on the other side of the double doors. They were all together, and she yanked at the handle with a snarl, ready to pull them wide and fire. Locked. Thin, opaque windows in the office doors offered a blurred sense of what was going on, and the gun wavered in her hands. It was tempting to shoot, but she couldn't afford to hit Warwick with the gun. It had to be the knife for him. She yanked at the door again as the lights went out, dropping the gallery beyond into darkness. 7 shots left, and I have to kill all 4 of them. Goddess, including the boy. Tajer's breath caught, and she looked down at the repulsive human pistol in her hand. No one said anything about killing a boy, but she was committed. She took a few steps and studied the door. Get hold of yourself. There's no way out. I have... Fuck. Pulling out her omnipad, she stared at the time. Plenty of time left. She forced herself to breathe steadily as she backed away from the door. 20 minutes. They have nowhere to run and 4 shots have to count. Can't let them get past. Just 4, and then step a little stiff. I can enjoy that. Raising the pistol, she sighted down the short barrel and aimed at the lock. Her hand wavered. Get a grip, woman. You can't afford to miss. Her breath was still hoarse, coming in fits, and she closed her eyes, gripping the pistol with both hands, as she fought down the horror and the terror. In the dark, with a human. The thought kept echoing in the back of her mind, and her eyes snapped open. Kill him and you kill your fear. Kill him and you get it all back. She'd been telling herself that for weeks now. It was time to make it come true. There was still a tremor in her hand as she raised the pistol, but her training took over. Even a Navy admiral had to qualify every few years, and she slid 1 foot back. It was just a door. She tucked the pistol in with her left hand, coming up to support her right. She cupped the butt of the pistol and steadied her aim. Just a door. Sighting down the barrel, she gave one ragged exhale, held her breath, and fired. Travelling back to Japan, now the Japan sector, with Mever had been wonderful. The Japanese had been unfeignedly cordial toward her, and their visits around the island had been a delight as she visited universities and toured historic sites. While Tom had relied on the translator supplied by the Ministry of Culture to handle most of the arrangements and give Mever a deeper understanding of the subtle nuances, for him, there was a sentimental quality to the trip. His time in the Air Force had given him 3 wonderful years in Japan. It had been a special time in his life. In his youth, Japan was a place he never thought he'd see, much less live in, and landing a slot for his second duty station now carried fond memories. His daughter had been born there. He'd made friends during that tour who had lasted a lifetime. Returning there, armed with the Academy credit account? Of course he went shopping. After explaining what he was trying to create, Minister Arata had been more than helpful. Her remit promoting Japanese culture had only confirmed his initial fears. The vast spending power of the imperial credit, the drive toward modernization. All of these scenes could so easily serve to pick Earth clean of anything the Shorvanti desired. But Arata has seemed positive, confident. At the time, it helped calm his misgivings. Japan had survived the Meiji Restoration and emerged as a modern country with its culture and heritage tested, but enduring. Now it would do so again. So would the world. Arata's efforts in providing Mever with all the right contacts and all the best examples for the Academy collection had been as cunning as they seemed effortless. Far longer than Tom, she'd been searching for opportunities to create a bridge of understanding that would carry weight. It was tenuous, but all beginnings were. Now, the Japanese exhibit was one of the Shorvanti's favourites, with its stunning array of handcrafted wares. In a galaxy of limitless resources, the one thing of transcendent value was original art. Something beautiful and unique had worth, and Mever's silk kimono had not been so much a stroke of luck as Arata finding the right moment. That didn't mean the minister had been willing to let Tom run riot with his funds. There had been one bone of contention: the sale of antiquities. The drive to modernize Japan to imperial standards was speeding forward, hand in hand, with a burgeoning revival in the traditional arts and crafts. But the Japanese had no interest in selling their historical artifacts. Fortunately, there had been a compromise. In the forested hills of Nara, the remote village had gone unmolested by time and invasion. As a newly proclaimed living treasure, Kunihira Kawachi laboured at his forge. With a growing body of disciples, the aging master had seemed quietly gratified that his craft would survive. While Minister Arata had been firm about the sale of antiquities, she had been only too happy to help Tom with one particular purchase. After drawing her dagger, O'Reilly reached out and pulled the door open wide. The modest light from the corridor poured in behind her, as she stepped cautiously inside and gave her eyes a moment to adjust. The gallery spread out before her was gloomy, lit only by a wash of illumination from lit display cases, and the flicker of video scrolling over their presentations for absent tourists. Wark would be in the back. A moment to finish him, and her targets would be cowering in the far room. Letting her eyes adjust to the gallery, she felt another hot flash pass over her. It was the old panic, but worse. In the dark. In the dark. In the dark with a human. She grit her teeth and jutted her tusks out in anger, fighting past the heat of her fear. Forced it into hot anger. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she cast around towards the back. A flicker of movement caught her eye and she grinned, a giddy exultation passing over her. She felt weightless. The burden was finally lifting from her, after the weeks since her humiliation. After all the years since Earth. Exhibits lined each wall, while display cases packed with artifacts swirled down the center of the room, forming 2 aisles. Seeing no way around, she moved in, skirting the cases as she crept down the left row. There were no other exits. The only way this could go wrong would be if anyone got past her. This would all be over. Soon. Over the last few years, humanity had already proven it could master the nuances of combat on the galactic stage. Tales of human stamina and unconventional thinking had raised humans in the esteem of the races of the Imperium, as well as made the Alliance and Consortium wary neighbours. With that in mind, Tom had opted to keep a display of weapons as far from the exhibit on humanity as possible. The Voyager exhibit offered a promise of humanity as something finer, nobler, than a future merely as subordinate killers for the glory of the Empire. At best, a display of weapons would have been counterproductive to all he hoped to accomplish. There were only 2 exceptions. One lay in the Australian exhibit, nestled with a small collection of artifacts and scrolling displays of the sector, from the Barossa Valley in the south to the vast expanses of the north. Tom had no idea whatsoever how to use a boomerang. Mavere had absolutely loved the thing. As for the other... As his fingertips closed around the suka, the katana slid from his saya, with the merest whisper of steel against the grain of his sire. Tom hadn't wasted 3 years in Japan, and he leapt at the opportunity to learn Aaho. Unlike Kenyo, with its stylized forms of combat for attacks above the waist, heavy protection and bamboo blades, Aaho used traditional katas meant for hard fighting. It also used the Aiheito, a katana in all respects save for its dull blade. Tom's Aiheito was a perfect imitation in appearance and weight. Perfect for training, but while the tip was sharp, the blade itself was not a living weapon. Nothing at all like the masterpiece in his hand. Lacking the length of his Aiheito, the sword felt lighter in his hands. The wrapping of the Aito along the haft was rich black leather, rather than the dense brown cotton of his practice sword. Looking down, he still had the presence of mind to set the saya against a corner of the wall, where it met the display. Produced by a living treasure, the blade was a work of art and a magnificent testimony to skills honed over a lifetime. Kawachi had demonstrated his creation with pride, slicing a sheet of paper merely by letting it fall along the upturned edge. In the darkened room, light shone off the blade. Looking down at it in his hand, the cedar pattern of the ha wound down along the shaft. It didn't glitter in the near darkness, but it felt like it should. A living weapon. Glancing at the door to the Voyager room, he thought of the girls inside. They'd be worried sick, to say nothing of them fretting over Vadim. At least calling on them to take care of the boy had gotten them moving. As the sharp crack of the shot rang out, he wedged himself back against the wall. Silence fell, and he peered around the corner. Long moments passed. The gallery door opened, framing the tall figure as she slipped inside. Light spilled over the gold breastplate of a naval officer. Memory stirred, but Tom was too busy trying to calm his racing breath as the figure stopped, pausing to look around before pulling the door closed behind her. Gloom descended once more, pierced only with colours from the flickering displays, like a video arcade from his youth. Off in the distance, something Indian was playing over the room, from the music display. Indecipherable lyrics in Hindi covering the muttered dialogue from countless displays. Despite the cooling fibers woven into his mess dress uniform, Tom felt himself breaking into a cold sweat. Hidden in the darkness and wishing he could hear the footsteps, he realized how blind he truly was, and darted a look around the corner. Light played off her uniform, but she was there. Moving slowly past each exhibit, she was already a third of the way through the gallery. Was time passing that quickly? Time. When he'd met Captain Solani out on the cliffs, she'd mentioned cameras. Surveillance for Melondi's protection. Another chill of fear coursed through him, but he hadn't brought a sword to a gunfight. To save the kids, he just had to play for time. Cold certainty stole over him as he raised the katana just behind his head and adjusted his grip. Glancing at his hiding place, he slid the shift into the shadows as much as he was able and stepped half into view. "So, it's just one of you?" he said. The figure paused, extending one arm, but there were other exhibits in the way. The sound of gunfire never came. "One of me is all that's needed," the woman shrugged before coming on once more, moving past the African exhibits. "Don't keep me long, Wark. I have a show to see." Where had he heard that voice? Fuck. Admiral Tajer? What the fuck? Arali Tajer. It came out as a croak. When had his mouth gone so dry? He cleared his throat and tried again. Tajer's reputation and the aftermath of preterm night hadn't escaped him. "Tajer, so I guess you got over your fainting spell?" "Just let me pass, Wark. Curl up in a ball and let me do what I came to do," she said after a moment. "I might even let you live." His heart was still pounding. Maybe it was just the tired cliché, but Wark felt the chill drop away. His anger, so long repressed, flared and rose like an ember into a flame. "Seriously? Now that's just pathetic." He spoke up, making himself heard over the music. "You slink in here and think you're going to trick me with that threadbare crap? You've already got enough blood on your hands, you cowardly bitch." "Blood on my hands? You humans make me sick." She paused in the aisle and venomously spat out her words. "We only killed around 3 million of you. Your Israel sector alone was ready to nuke the Aswan Dam, killing every woman, man and child in a flood of radioactive superheated water. You'd have wiped 100 million of yourselves in just one of your pathetic little border wars, and you vermin have the gall to say we're animals?" "I know what we should have done, Wark," Tajer growled. She was looking his way, and he stepped out of the gloom, the katana still above his head and resting in shadow. "We should have nuked you from the edge of the system, taken out your major cities, and let the survivors think you'd done it to yourselves. Just a few months' wait, and you'd have been calling us saviors when we arrived to scrape up the pieces." "Damn shame you weren't running the show like your book claims," he said, trying to bait her again. Slow her down. "I guess hindsight's a real bitch." He could see the hulking shrill woman through the glass of the Polynesian exhibit. She stopped at his bar for a moment, but she was already moving again. Soon enough she'd round the last corner and be on him. The aisles were too narrow for a proper swing, and the door to the Voyager gallery was only feet away. One clear shot, and she'd be in with the kids. "Maybe I'll write another book. The value of making a clean sweep." She paused at the corner and chuckled. "You can hold your hands up and surrender all you want. I'm going to enjoy killing you." "You don't get to kill another little girl!" Tom rushed from the corner. There were only a few steps to reach the aisle before Tajer, an instant to close the distance. Just one cut before she got off a clear shot. Off in the darkness, the music changed. There was time for the blink of an eye as the first chords of the bass reached his ears. A vast weight, a sense of injustice, slammed down upon his soul. Time slowed as he swept forward to meet her at the corner. A fleeting thought slipped through his mind. I can't believe I'm going to die hearing this crap. Tajer was at the corner, and he expected the shot. The pain as the round tore through him. He looked for the gun as light flickered off steel. Tajer was holding a knife. The blade in her hands looked like a fucking Bowie knife, and it came up as she charged toward him, ready to slam it into his ribs. A flicker of memory passed through his mind. Sensei lecturing him on Ma'ai, the distance between two opponents. Knowing the length of his arm, visualizing the reach of his blade, adding the distance as he stepped forward into the swing. He took one step, then another. The blade was descending, slicing down at a sharp angle, a Kessa stroke. Memory blurred with the moment as he yelled his kiai. Pain happened, and the kiai turned into a howl of agony. Vadim, I'm sorry. Melondi looked down at him as she held his hand, wishing she could only do something to protect him. But the few minutes in the back room had given her time to think. She disengaged his hand from hers as gently as she was able, and moved toward the door. I don't have time to explain, but I need you to stay back here, all right? Where the deep do you think you're going? Desi rasped out, stepping in her way. Get your ass down on the ground! Melondi shook her head. I should be out there. We should all be out there. Vadim's voice was frightened, but he slipped in beside her, looking at them frantically. There's 4 of us in here, and one of them. We left the professor out there. One of them that we know of, Deshin hissed. He said he'd be here after us. He's keeping you safe, Your Highness. So get to the back of the room and get on the damn ground. Hold on. Kellogg stood up from where she'd propped her omnipad against a wall and stepped over, eyeing Desi closely. What do you mean, Highness? I am not, Not the time! Desi growled in exasperation at Melondi before looking back at Lark. She's a princess. I'm only a commoner, Lark. Keep them down on the ground, and your family will probably get another title. I'm not a noble, Lark blurted. I'm just a reporter. What? Mel and Desi rounded to look at her almost as one. I'm a reporter, Lark shrugged, and gave them a sheepish grin. I'm not a noble either, and she's right. Mel, your royal... Mel, she is right. You have to stay here. We'll go out. I am not staying in here while people die for me. You think I don't know how you feel? Mel, someone's already died out there. Desi glared defiantly. Tom is out there and he's like a father to me. He's like one to us both. Melondi shook her head in denial, but she couldn't help looking down at Vadim. He was afraid, but he wasn't trying to hide. How could she? Desi, I am not hiding back here while this happens. If you get killed, then we'll die for nothing. You think they're going to let any of us live? Mel glanced down at Vadim. She had expected him to be terrified, but he was looking up at her earnestly. We'll go out together. He gulped, but nodded. The Voyager exhibit was almost soundproof, standing ready for guests to listen to the presentation of humanity's first offering to the galaxy. With the presentation turned off, the only sound was their voices, but that close to the door they still heard the scream. That's it! The 4 moved together, but Desi was already shoving herself back into the gallery, rushing to be the first out of the door. Get the fuck... Ah! Deshin shrieked as she went down. Tom lay curled on the floor. The pain hadn't happened at first. Not like now. In the first few moments, it had felt like being slapped. Punched, even, as the weight of Tajer slammed into him. Later, the agony came. He'd gone down hard, the katana falling away from his fingertips. He managed to clutch at his side, at first. There was blood, slick on his hands as he gripped his side, and while the pain was excruciating, for a while, Time was passing. The pain was there, fading away. Now, he lay cold on the floor. It only hurt when he moved, and his breath came in jerking rasps, but the pain had receded. The room was starting to feel cold, leaving him numb. There was another scream, but it was impossible to think, to move. He lay there, a broken marionette, as the grating lyrics of the hateful tune washed over him. Come, 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 chameleon. You come and go, you come and go. The music seemed farther away now, distant. He needed to close his eyes, just for a while.